The heat clung to the walls of Ma Tucker's diner like an old memory that wouldn't fade. The flickering neon sign outside buzzed lazily, and inside the smell of coffee, fried bacon, and faint cigarette smoke mixed in the air. Eli sat tucked in the farthest booth, pressed near the window that rattled when the wind blew. He was 12, sharp-eyed and quiet. His small hands clutched a spiral book filled with page after page of wrestlers, some real, some imagined. He wore a slightly worn WWE cap over his mop of dark hair, and his wheelchair barely fit between the booth and table. Every line he drew in that book was a piece of his voice. He didn't talk much to the other kids. They didn't know what to do with someone who couldn't run or jump or even stand. But in his sketches, Eli was never limited. His characters flew off turnbuckles, threw people through flaming tables, and rose from brutal beatdowns. They never stayed down. Neither did Eli, at least not in spirit. His mom, Melanie, walked over with a glass of water, brushing hair out of her face with her wrist. She looked older than she was, the kind of tired that didn't come from age, but from years of swallowing pride and pushing through pain. She bent down and touched Eli's shoulder gently. "You okay, baby?" she asked. Eli nodded, flipping a page in his sketchbook. "Working on a new finisher move. It's called The Rise." Melanie smiled faintly. "Sounds powerful." The moment was interrupted by a roar outside. Deep, growling engines like a small storm approaching. Eli turned to look. A group of bikers thundered into the lot, all tattoos, leather, and loud laughter. They were regulars, and they never came in quietly. Melanie's shoulders stiffened as they entered. One of them kicked the door open wider than needed. Another tossed his helmet across the booth like it owned the place. The leader of the group, a bulky man with a braided beard and snake tattoo on his neck, scanned the room and smirked. His name was Rex, and everyone knew his type. A man who took silence as weakness and kindness as a challenge. Eli had gone back to drawing, trying to stay invisible. But that's not how predators worked. Rex noticed him. "Well, what do we have here?" Rex said, walking over with beer breath and curiosity laced with cruelty. "Little man drawing big men." Eli didn't respond, his eyes fixed on his page. Rex leaned in and snatched the sketchbook. "What's this? A fantasy world for broken boys?" Eli reached for it, but Rex lifted it high out of reach. "Easy wheels, don't roll away now." The other bikers laughed, sharp, cutting laughter that echoed through the diner like broken glass. One called out, "Hey Rex, don't mess up his steering." Someone else chimed in, "Careful, you'll make him short-circuit." Rex casually ripped a page out of the book. Eli flinched like he'd been slapped, but stayed still. His fists tightened. Not a tear fell. Not yet. Behind the counter, Melanie saw it all. Her breath caught in her throat. She moved to intervene, but the diner's owner, a wiry man in a grease-stained apron, caught her wrist. "Leave it," he hissed. "Don't make a scene. They tip better than anyone else." Melanie froze. She was torn between her job and her son. Again, her lips trembled. She looked at Eli. He looked away. The sketchbook hit the table with a soft thud, now missing pages and dignity. "I just want to go home," Eli whispered, barely audible. Melanie walked over and crouched down beside him, forcing a smile. "We will soon, baby. Just a little longer." Then another sound, not like the first. This engine was smoother, slower. A low, confident growl. It stopped just outside the diner. Every biker paused mid-laugh, as if instinctively sensing a shift in the air. The door creaked open. Eli didn't look up yet, but Melanie did. And for the first time in a long time, her expression changed. The black matte pickup rolled into the diner lot with a quiet confidence, its engine low but unmistakably powerful. A sound that didn't need to prove itself. It wasn't flashy, it didn't announce itself like the roar of the bikes, but somehow it silenced them. Rex paused mid-joke. Another biker turned to peer through the diner's smeared window. Inside, Forks froze mid-air. Even the coffee machine seemed to hush. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a giant. Not in some superhero costume or camera-ready suit, but in a simple hoodie and jeans. Dust clung to his boots. The way he moved wasn't hurried or arrogant. It was deliberate, calm, like someone who'd carried more than weights in a gym. Someone who knew what it meant to stand tall after life knocked you flat. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson entered Ma Tucker's like a man walking into a memory. He glanced around, saw the stale hush in the air, and smiled politely. "I heard this place serves the best sweet potato pie west of the Mississippi," he said with a wink to the waitress near the counter. She blinked like she wasn't sure he was real. A spoon dropped somewhere in the back. Then his eyes scanned the floor. They landed on a torn piece of paper. A sketch. His brow furrowed. He bent and picked it up. Wrestlers, hand-drawn. The lines weren't perfect, but they were passionate. He followed the direction of where the paper must have come from. There in the booth, the boy in the wheelchair, Eli. "You like WWE?" The Rock asked softly as he approached, voice warm but firm. Eli stared at him like he wasn't sure if he was dreaming or awake. He nodded slowly, hands shaking just a little. One of the bikers piped up, trying to reclaim the moment. "We were just talking to the champ here," he laughed. The Rock ignored him and knelt beside Eli, gently placing the page on the table. "Did you draw this?" he asked, tapping the paper with his massive finger. Eli nodded again, this time with a little more pride. The Rock studied it like it was a museum piece. "You've got something here, real skill." Rex leaned back in his chair and scoffed. "What are you now? Talent scout for crybabies?" The laughter that followed wasn't as strong this time. It sounded a little forced, a little nervous. The Rock stood slowly, taller, broader, not threatening, just solid. Still, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't point a finger. He simply said loud enough for the whole room to hear, "When you laugh at a kid like this, you're laughing at every one of us who ever got back up after the world knocked us down." The weight of those words hit the tile floor harder than any punch. No one moved. A woman near the back dabbed her eye with a napkin. A young cook peeked from the kitchen. Even the owner, who moments ago told Melanie to stay quiet, suddenly found himself swallowing hard. Melanie stood frozen behind the counter. Her hands trembled. She wasn't sure if it was anger, shock, or gratitude pulsing through her. Maybe all three. For years, she had carried the burden of being quiet, of letting people like Rex take the air from the room while she just tried to breathe. But now someone had spoken. Not just someone, The Rock. And he wasn't performing. He wasn't selling tickets or posing for cameras. He was here, real, present, speaking to her son like he mattered. The silence in the room didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of realization, full of shame, full of respect. And as The Rock turned back to Eli, the boy did something he hadn't done all day. He smiled. It was small, but it was brave. And somehow it made the room feel just a little warmer. The Rock's gaze lingered on Eli for a moment longer. Then he reached into the pocket of his hoodie and pulled out his phone. He didn't rush. He just said quietly, as if the room wasn't watching every breath he took, "Hey, bring him in." It wasn't clear who he was talking to, but the tone was enough to make the hairs on people's arms rise. A few minutes passed. The silence inside the diner felt almost sacred now. Even Rex, who usually dominated every room he entered, was suddenly quieter. Something had shifted. The noise, the bravado, all of it had taken a backseat to something far stronger. Then came the sound of another engine. A black SUV rolled into the lot and parked beside the Rock's truck. The door opened and out stepped John Cena. No bright wrestling gear, no fanfare, just jeans, boots, and a black t-shirt. But even in his simplicity, he looked like a force. He walked straight into the diner, gave The Rock a knowing nod, and the two men bumped fists. Cena's eyes scanned the room quickly, landing on the only person who truly mattered in that moment, Eli. Cena walked over, crouched down beside the booth, and met the boy's eyes. Eli could barely process what was happening. His hero, both of his heroes, were standing right here like a dream he had drawn into his sketchbook. "So this is the artist you told me about?" Cena asked, smiling. Eli swallowed hard and gave a small, trembling nod. Cena reached into his back pocket and pulled out a red wristband, the one he wore during his last charity match, and slid it gently onto Eli's wrist. "You've got more fight than most of the guys I've wrestled," Cena said softly. And a bigger imagination, too. Rex shifted uncomfortably at the bar. The bikers around him were quiet, looking at each other with unsure expressions. This wasn't how things usually went. They expected to walk in, throw their weight around, and leave feeling big. But now they looked small. Cena turned his head slightly toward Rex and asked, calm but firm, "You ever get slammed into a diner floor over a drawing?" The words hung in the air like thunder without the storm. Tension thickened instantly. A few customers leaned forward in their booths. One man dropped his spoon into his soup. Rex straightened up, his lips parted, but nothing came out. That's when The Rock stepped between them. Not to escalate, but to steady the moment. "Nah," he said. "We're not here to fight." He turned back toward Eli and rested a hand on the boy's shoulder. "We're here to lift." He looked around the room slowly, making sure every eye met his. "People like you don't break, kid. You rise, and we rise with you." The room, once filled with mockery, began to stir with something entirely different. Someone near the door clapped once, tentatively. Then another joined, and then a few more. Soon the diner echoed with soft applause. Not wild, not forced, but respectful. Real. One of the bikers, the youngest among them, stood up and quietly made his way out the door, helmet in hand. He didn't say a word, but his face said everything. Rex remained in his seat, his stare lowered. For the first time, the man who never backed down didn't seem sure of anything anymore. Behind the counter, Melanie stood frozen. She hadn't moved since Cena walked in. Her eyes were locked on the scene, on her son's smile, on the kindness pouring from two men who had no reason to be here except one, because they chose to be. Then The Rock turned and walked over to her. He didn't say anything at first, just placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You raised a champ," he said. Her lips quivered. She tried to speak but couldn't. The tears came quickly, not out of sadness, but out of something deeper. Relief, validation, the kind of emotional exhale that only comes when someone finally sees everything you've carried and says you did good. And as her son looked up at her with joy glowing in his face, Melanie finally let herself cry. Not quietly, not hidden, but openly, proudly. 1 week later, a cardboard box arrived at the small apartment above the auto repair shop where Melanie and Eli lived. It had no fancy branding, no return address, just a discreet label and a surprising weight. Melanie opened the door, still wiping flour from her arms, having just finished baking a pie for the diner's new dessert menu. Eli rolled up beside her, curious. They opened it together. Inside was a pristine digital drawing tablet, the kind professional illustrators used. It rested atop a bundle of neatly packed accessories. But what caught Eli's attention first was the handwritten note, tucked in a sleek black envelope. Melanie unfolded it and read aloud. "Every superhero starts in a diner, but they don't stay there. Keep drawing. Dwayne and John." Eli stared at the signature like it was a golden ticket. Tucked beneath the note was something else, a formal invitation with the WWE logo embossed in silver. They were invited. The following weekend, Eli found himself in a place he had only seen in dreams. The WWE headquarters. Tall glass walls, giant banners of iconic matches, life-size statues of legends. It felt unreal. But the most surreal moment came when he was escorted to the creative development wing. There, in a room filled with monitors and soundproof recording booths, he sat beside a WWE storyboard artist who had one of Eli's own sketches loaded on screen. The artist adjusted his glasses and smiled. "We don't usually let guests in here," he said. "But your art? It's got real movement. Real story. This guy?" He pointed to a caped figure Eli had drawn. "He's not just fighting, he's surviving." Eli beamed. Then came the moment he never imagined. Cena and The Rock walked into the booth next door and began recording lines. But they weren't playing themselves. They were voicing the characters Eli had invented. Hearing his words, his imagination, come alive through their voices was more than a dream come true. It was a message. You belong here. Back in Nevada, things changed too. The group of bikers who once ruled Ma Tucker's with crude laughter and bad jokes stopped showing up. Whether it was guilt, shame, or just knowing the town had shifted under their boots, no one really knew. But the diner was quieter now, kinder. Melanie, once just a tired waitress who knew how to keep her head down, had been promoted to manager. Her boss didn't even argue. He just handed her the keys one morning with a nervous smile and said, "You already run this place anyway." Above the cash register, framed in thick oak, hung a sketch, torn edges carefully preserved. It was Eli's original drawing. Below it, in bold red marker, John Cena had written, "Never underestimate who's watching." Customers often asked about it. Some recognized the story, others just felt the weight in the room. Ma Tucker's became known not just for its pies, but for the boy who didn't flinch. At school, Eli's world shifted too. Kids who once looked away now waved at him in the halls. A few even asked for drawing tips. Some asked about The Rock. Others asked about Cena, but most just stared at him with awe. "You're the kid who made them show up, right?" Eli never bragged. He'd just smile and nod. He kept drawing every day. Heroes, villains, comebacks, and moments where the underdog stands, even when they can't walk. Then came the local comic convention, a modest event in the community center gym, but it meant the world to him. Eli sat behind a folding table covered in his sketches. A printed banner flapped gently above him reading, "The Boy Who Drew Giants." Kids lined up, wide-eyed and curious. Parents stood nearby, nudging their children to look, to ask, to believe. One boy, maybe 7 years old, leaned over the table and whispered, "Did they really come just for you?" Eli looked down at the boy's curious face, then at the picture the boy held, a print of the very first drawing he'd made in that diner. "They came because I didn't stop drawing," Eli said quietly, even when they laughed. That night, as the sun dipped below the hills and the stars blinked into place, Melanie watched her son from a distance, surrounded by lights, laughter, and pages full of power. He didn't have a championship belt. He didn't need one. He had a voice and a story, and it all started in the corner booth of a dusty diner where a boy once believed giants could rise if someone just looked close enough.